Hey guys, tonight we explore a city where the past doesn't whisper, it clinks. A place where time isn't a number or a ticking clock, but a string of beads worn proudly on a wrist or hung quietly above a doorway. We're heading to the ancient Yoruba city of Eel Life. Right as the day ends, you're stepping into a world that records history not in books, but in glass, clay, and memory. It's warm, the air smells like roasted yams, and someone is pounding something rhythmic in a mortar just out of sight. Now, let's get one thing clear. If you were hoping for a precise wristwatch or a digital calendar, you probably won't survive this. Because here, time is flexible, communal, emotional, and somehow, more accurate in its own mysterious way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where, and when, you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as twilight spills across the red-dusted rooftops of Eel Life. Smoke curls lazily from clay chimneys. In the distance, a drumbeat thumps softly, steady as a heartbeat, ancient as the earth itself. A warm wind carries the scent of oil palm soup, charcoal, and something metallic, maybe ironwork, maybe anticipation. You trudge slowly through a narrow path, where every doorway seems to watch you. The houses lean in a little. They remember things. That's not poetic exaggeration. Yoruba homes were often decorated with carved messages, murals, and most importantly tonight, beads. Someone passes you wearing an elaborate necklace. It's not flashy, more like sacred. Every few steps, a tiny wooden disc swings against a coral bead. They're not there for looks. Each piece records something. A wedding, a flood, a baby born sideways. It's a kind of journal, but softer. One artisan once said, beads don't just carry colors. They carry decisions. And in Eel Life, decisions pile up quickly. The city itself is said to be the navel of the world. That's not a metaphor. They really believe it. According to Yoruba cosmology, the earth began here, with a divine chain lowered from the heavens to this very soil. You half expect to trip over it in the dark. Even the cobblestones seem arranged by intention. Historians still argue whether these early urban layouts were planned by central leaders or evolved through family consensus. Either way, the symmetry is calming, like walking inside a poem that's been carefully edited over centuries. You pass by a child squatting near a cracked pot, arranging colorful glass pieces into a circle. He's not just playing, he's recording something. Maybe how many days since his father returned from the north. Maybe the number of mangoes they've eaten. Maybe just his age. It's all valid. One bead, found in a burial site here, was made of carnelian that likely traveled over 1.500 miles. That's like if your calendar had parts imported from Italy, India, and your grandma's attic. And somehow, it still made sense to everyone who looked at it. You turn left near a shrine. A curtain of shimmering beads separates the outer world from whatever quiet magic lies inside. A woman parts it, disappears within. You hear chanting. It stops. A new rhythm begins. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a transaction. Sometimes the beads speak. In Yoruba culture, colors matter. Blue might mean wisdom. White, peace. Red, well, red can mean war, passion, or Tuesday, depending on who's wearing it and how they feel. Historians still can't agree on a universal key to decode bead strings. And maybe that's the point. Time isn't one size fits all here. You stop in front of a low building with a broad veranda. A man sits there, half in shadow, half lit by firelight. His robe rustles like leaves. You notice his left wrist is wrapped with a wide band of cowrie-studded beads. He catches your eye, then looks away, not dismissively, but with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where he is in time. Not in hours, not in days, in meaning. You realize you've been holding your breath, The atmosphere is thick but gentle, like honey left in the sun. The city breathes history without breaking a sweat. It does not rush. It never forgets. In the distance, a goat bleats angrily at nothing in particular. Someone laughs. A bead clinks onto stone. Another moment marked. And so your journey begins. You find yourself drawn toward the palace at the center of life, low and wide, with carved pillars and a courtyard shaded by towering trees that probably remember more than most humans. The air here is thicker, more sacred, and every footstep feels like it should ask permission. You obey instinct and walk slower. Near the entrance, you spot it, the beaded crown. It sits atop a carved wooden stand, guarded by two silent men in indigo robes. The crown, called an adanla, glitters, not like gold, but like a deep well of stories. Coral, glass, brass, and seeds, all arranged in patterns so dense and deliberate, they seem impossible to decode. And yet, for the Oba who wears it, every bead is a signal, not just about rank or wealth, but about time. You didn't expect a hat to keep track of history. But here you are. The crown has a veil of beads that hang over the face. It's both literal and symbolic. The king sees the world through a lens of ancestral time. He doesn't look at you directly. He looks through memory, through the past, through every ruler before him, through bead strings that tell him when to plant, when to judge, and when to shut up and let the priests take over. One loop on the left side? That's a reference to the year of the locusts. Another string, green and short, marks a royal wedding that almost didn't happen, because of a chicken. Long story. The crown is an archive of choices, a wearable library, and possibly very itchy. You're told the Oba only dons it during certain rituals, most of which are older than writing. When he does, the people sing not about him, but about those who wore the crown before him. Time stacks here. It doesn't tick, it layers. Historians still argue whether the adanla's bead sequences follow a strict temporal code or a symbolic one. Some claim they represent lunar cycles. Others say they're more political, mapping alliances, betrayals, and reconciliations. One scholar even suggested that the crown is a form of emotional ledger, tracking not just events, but their social weight. You sit on a low bench nearby, pretending not to stare. A group of women pass, their wrists clinking softly with every step. Each one wears a set of beads called ilik, and though they smile politely, you realize they're wearing timelines. One woman's beads are old, cracked, matte, faded, but she fingers them like prayer beads. Another's glint like fireflies, freshly made, still loud. Maybe she just reached a new stage in life, marriage, motherhood, or her first big market win. You try to imagine how this might work back home. Wearing your resume on a necklace, displaying your exes in bracelet form, carrying grief or triumph in a brooch. It'd be exhausting, but also honest. A palace aide quietly explains that the Oba has personal bead attendants, yes, that's a job, who learn to string updates to the crown after major events. Not just wars or coronations, but things like solar eclipses, unusual births, or that time it rained frogs. You're assured this only happened once. But the beads don't lie. Each new event doesn't erase the old. It just joins the queue, like layers of sediment in a riverbank, or the ever-growing number of unread emails in your inbox. The beaded crown is more than decor. It's a statement that leadership is time-sensitive, that to rule well, you must remember well, that forgetting is not just careless, it's dangerous. Because in this culture, memory isn't personal, it's public infrastructure. You notice something subtle. None of the beads are uniform. Some are cracked, some slightly misshapen, some look like they were salvaged from a market stall or a broken anklet. And yet, here they are, woven into royal regalia. Time here is not about perfection. It's about inclusion. A passing elder mutters something under his breath. A crown with no old beads cannot rule the future. You think it's poetic, then you realize it's practical. Even today, Yoruba kings are crowned with beaded regalia that, in part, predates colonial contact. It's one of the longest ongoing bead traditions in the world. And it's not just a holdover from the past. It's still evolving. But you're getting sleepy now. The fire crackles nearby, and someone starts humming a low tune that could either be a lullaby or a warning. You're not sure. You lean back. You're not royalty. But for a moment, you feel the gentle weight of time pressing onto your shoulders like a familiar shawl. Not heavy, just present. And somewhere, another bead is being strung onto a crown you'll never see. The sun has fully vanished now, slipping behind the forest like a bashful storyteller. And the city begins to shift. You're drawn by the distant rhythm of people gathering. A market, still humming after dark, stretches out before you like a living organism, glowing oil lamps flickering. Shadows darting between baskets, voices rising and falling in lazy spirals of negotiation. And then you hear them. The beads. Clinking, sliding, tapping. It's not just noise, it's data transfer. Yoruba style. You drift into the crowd and notice that almost everyone wears some form of beads. Around the neck, ankles, waist, even braided into hair. But here's the thing. You're starting to see patterns. Not just pretty patterns, functional ones. A trader waves her arms. Beaded bangles jangling as she haggles over cola nuts. Each strand is strung with colors that, at a glance, tell you she's from the Northeast, has reached adulthood, and has likely out-traded 3 husbands. You don't speak Yoruba, but her accessories are basically yelling, "Don't mess with me, sweetie." Another merchant has a loop of clay beads on his belt. He rubs one between his fingers every time a sale is made. You realize, that's his ledger. No notebooks, no apps, just beads, one for each transaction. Historians still debate whether these bead practices count as a true proto-writing system or a cultural shorthand. But when you watch a buyer examine a necklace, squint, then add 3 extra cowries to the deal based solely on bead count, it's hard to call it anything but information. You wander deeper into the market where the smells intensify: smoked fish, fermented locust beans, raw shea butter, and the beads continue their quiet chatter. You're starting to feel like the city itself is pulsing through them, heartbeat by heartbeat. Then you reach a stall where beads are actually being traded. A man sells strings of glass in exchange for stories. No, really. One woman leans in and whispers something into his ear. He nods and hands her a string of amber-colored beads. She walks off smiling, and he ties a knot on a hanging rope, logging the trade. You wonder if you just witnessed commerce or therapy. You ask about it. Turns out, in some circles, beads are emotional currency. You tell a tale, a loss, a victory, a secret, and receive a bead that symbolizes that moment. It's a way of saying, this happened, and it matters. It's also a quiet rebellion against forgetting. One fringe historian, probably mocked at conferences, claims Yoruba markets once operated partly on bead-based bartering, where people agreed on subjective worth. A blue bead might mean half a goat, but also, I'm sorry, economically fuzzy, emotionally sharp. You pause at a table where a woman threads new beads by oil lamp. Her fingers are swift but gentle. You ask what she's making. She says it's for her son, who just turned 13. The beads will mark this year, his height, his new voice, the time he cried because a goat stepped on his foot. All of it, catalogued in glass. It strikes you that in this world, memory isn't stored in a cloud server or buried in a photo album. It's worn, displayed, whispered, and updated every time you touch it. A teenager passes by with bead strings woven into her hair. She catches your eye, grins, and says, "These? They're just for looking cool." But you notice one is shaped like a tiny drum, another like a turtle. Not random, just private. As the market begins to wind down, you hear a woman bargaining loudly over a strand of polished red beads. "That's a death color," she exclaims. "I'm not wearing that to a wedding." The seller shrugs. It's not death, it's transformation. They settle on a compromise, red, but only as an accent. Again, meaning isn't fixed here. It's negotiated. A single bead might mean bravery to one person, betrayal to another. Context matters. Story matters. Back home, you might tell time with alarms, pings, endless notifications. But here, you wrap it around your wrist and let it rest. The market's light dims. Someone calls for a final sale. Children are scooped onto backs. Baskets packed away. And yet, even in the fading crowd, the beads remain, swinging gently, quietly ticking the hours you didn't notice passing. You exhale, deeply, and somewhere nearby, another necklace begins to form, marking the night you wandered through a place where time doesn't demand attention. It simply adorns it. Now you follow the smell of something earthy and burning, like wet clay and wood smoke, with just a hint of molten mystery. You've stumbled into the beadmaker's quarter. It's quieter here, except for the occasional clink of glass on stone, or the puff of bellows coaxing fire into a frenzy. You duck into a squat little workshop, walls blackened by decades of soot, the floor littered with glass fragments that crunch under your sandals. It's surprisingly cool, despite the fire raging in the pit at the center. Someone hands you a gourd of water without speaking. You nod your thanks. You've arrived where time is forged. An older woman, face lined, eyes sharp, sits cross-legged by the kiln. Her hands are stained with ochre, and her lap holds a dozen unfinished beads in various stages of birth. She gestures for you to sit. You obey, cross-legged and suddenly very aware of your awkward knees. She holds up a small glob of glass, red, translucent, slightly menacing, and slips it onto a slender iron rod. It spins slowly as she molds it, pulling and tapping with the tip of a goat horn. The bead takes shape like a planet condensing from chaos. You're mesmerized. Clay first, she says, then fire, then memory. It's not a metaphor, it's the workflow. Beadmaking among the Yoruba is a revered craft, passed down not in books, but in fingertips. Artisans don't just make decorations. They make archives. Each bead is a timestamp, a data packet. What you wear says when you lived, what you lived through, and sometimes, just sometimes, who you loved. And that bead, it might outlive you by centuries. One archaeological dig near Eel uncovered a cache of beads that dated back over 900 years. Still bright, still perfectly spherical, still whispering. Historians still debate how early Yoruba artisans managed to create such uniform, high-quality glass beads with limited tools. Some propose hidden trade connections with Mediterranean glassmakers. Others argue local innovation. A few simply shrug and say, "Magic kiln?" You shift as another apprentice enters, carrying a bowl of powdered sand, lime, and ash. That's the recipe. Glass isn't born. It's cooked. A fire roars. The smell of melting minerals fills your nose. Oddly sweet and sharp. The beadmaker grabs a thin, glowing rod, then dips it in the mixture. She turns it carefully. You realize she's counting under her breath, not seconds, but heartbeats. That's how long it takes to shape a moment. Once shaped, the bead is rolled in charcoal dust, cooled slowly in an earthenware pot, and polished on rough stone until it gleams. You watch a young apprentice fumble one. It drops, shatters. He winces. The elder just chuckles. That bead wasn't ready to remember. Another one succeeds. A perfectly round disc of dark green glass. She holds it up to the lamplight, then sets it in a woven tray, where it will rest for a full day before being strung onto anything. Beads, like memories, need cooling time. You lean in and spot a tray labeled with small cowrie shells, each symbolizing a name, a ritual, or a season. One bead is marked for planting season, another for the day the river dried up. Yet another, slightly misshapen, is for the village dog that somehow saved a child from a snake. Beadmakers, it turns out, are also historians with very dirty hands. Someone brings in a broken necklace, older than most of the people in the room. It needs repair, but it's not about fixing. It's about contextual continuity. You don't just replace a bead. You must know what it meant, why it cracked, and whether it still belongs. Beads are emotional fossils. They preserve joy, sorrow, gossip, and rainfall. In one corner, a child is quietly sorting loose beads by color, chanting a song under his breath. Red for rain, white for peace, blue for dreams that hide from sleep. You don't ask where he learned it. Some things are just known. And you're finally getting it. These aren't trinkets. They're testimonies. Each bead is a slow burning commitment to remember well. As you rise to leave, the beadmaker offers you one, small, ember, warm from her palm. She doesn't say what it's for. She doesn't have to. You've already started your own necklace, haven't you? This moment is part of it now. Outside, the night air greets you like an old friend. Somewhere behind, the fire roars again. Another bead begins. Another time is marked. You wander through the sleepy alleys of eel life, guided now by something deeper than curiosity, something like quiet awe. You've learned that time here isn't just told. It's felt, worn, spun, broken, and healed. Ahead, you see a courtyard flickering with lanterns. A gathering. You hesitate at the edge. A woman in a deep blue wrapper waves you in. Come, she says, we're remembering. And so you enter a small ceremony, a memorial for someone who's passed. Not a funeral, exactly, not sadness, exactly, it's remembrance. And like everything else in Yoruba life, it is marked by beads. In the center sits a mat woven from raffia. Upon it lies a necklace, long, beautiful, and heavy. This isn't jewelry, it's a timeline. An elderly woman touches the first bead gently. She was born in rainy season. She murmurs, a soft blue bead. Next, a twisted orange one. She fell from a tree but didn't cry. She laughed. We all knew she'd be strong. One bead at a time. Her life is told, not as a list of years, but as moments. The first child, the time she chased a goat into the shrine by accident. A season of illness, represented by a bead that is cracked but still glowing. You sit cross-legged as stories unfold. The crowd chuckles. Someone hums. A toddler toddles past holding a rattle made of dried beads. It's all so gentle, so deeply human. The family doesn't cry much. They finger the beads. That's the grief. That's the ritual. One of them strings a new bead at the end, pale, cloudy, not yet polished. This is us missing her. They say, we'll smooth it with time. Historians still argue whether these beaded memorials should be considered oral history artifacts or emotional cartography. A few academic papers call them narrative talismans, which sounds impressive until you realize the locals just call it truth you can touch. A young girl asks if she can wear the necklace when she's older. Her aunt laughs. It's too long now. You'll trip over it. We'll split it. Take half when you turn 16. And just like that, a life becomes legacy. You spot an old man in the corner, cradling a small string of beads like a rosary. He's whispering names, maybe ancestors, maybe apologies, maybe both. You catch the faint glint of tears, or is it just oil lamp reflection? Hard to say. One woman tells you she wears a single bead under her clothes. Close to her heart, it's the last bead her mother touched. She died mid-sentence. She says softly, I finished her thought with a green bead. That's how we do. Outside of Yoruba culture, time is usually clinical, cold, neat rows of numbers. Here, it's intimate, vulnerable, often a little cracked, but still held. Even during colonial rule, when foreign powers tried to erase indigenous customs, this tradition endured, silently, in pockets and hymns and private ceremonies. The British outlawed certain rituals, but beads kept slipping through, stitched into grief, hidden in celebration. One rare piece in a London museum contains a bead whose design doesn't match any known Yoruba technique. Some believe it was a protest bead, made in haste, under threat, and sent abroad as a message. We're still counting. You realize something strange. In this courtyard, there are no clocks, no one wears a watch, and yet everyone knows exactly where they are in time. Because they carry it, in loops, in layers, in loss. You thank the host, and they press a bead into your palm. She liked strangers, they say. She would have liked you. The bead is deep green, almost black in the corners. It feels warmer than it should. You don't know what to say, so you just nod. You slip it into your pocket, or maybe closer, and as you step back into the quiet of the night, you carry her story, maybe just for tonight, maybe longer, but either way, you understand. To remember someone here isn't to talk about them. It's to keep their time going, one bead at a time. You wake slowly the next morning, if you even slept at all, because the city doesn't really sleep. Does it? Not in the usual way. It hums, it murmurs, it remembers. Even in dreams, you could still hear the beads, soft as rain on a tin roof. Today, your path leads toward the fields, past the shrines, beyond the markets, and out where the trees stretch taller. The birds sound more sarcastic, and people still watch the skies for meaning. This is where time grows. You meet a man, stooped, wiry, with hands like bark and a face that seems carved out of patience. He greets you with a nod and beckons toward a woven bracelet on his wrist. This tells me when to plant, he says plainly, like you might be the one who's confused. The bracelet is simple, just 7 large beads, spaced with tiny shells, but as he turns it, you realize it's more than ornament. It's a seasonal tracker, not precise in minutes and seconds, but attuned to things clocks ignore. Wind shifts, insect calls, the heaviness of air before rain. Each bead is a marker. He explains: rainy start, second moon, yam bloom, dry snap, millet leaf, river swell, and fire wind. He taps the 6th bead. We're here now. One more and we'll burn the brush. And you just nod like that's totally normal. Historians still argue whether these time markers evolved independently or were influenced by Islamic lunar calendars that filtered into the region centuries ago. Some point to uncanny alignments. Others insist on purely local innovation, born from watching the land for long generations. Either way, the result is clear. This man's wrist is smarter than your weather app. You follow him down a winding path lined with gourds and cassava, where scarecrows wear bead necklaces to remind the gods not to forget this plot. Beads aren't just time here. They're also petition. A small child runs past with a string of colorful glass around her neck, shouting, "It's eggplant season." You're not sure if she's right, but everyone nods like she might be. She grabs a handful of dirt, smells it like perfume, and grins. See? Smells like ripe. Honestly, you're starting to believe dirt can talk. Time in the fields isn't just about agriculture. It's about syncing life to the rhythms of the earth. Ceremonies are timed by these bead bracelets. Marriages are delayed if the millet fails to sprout on the 3rd bead. One man tells you his son was born during the corn bead, so they named him Okunma, which loosely means he who arrives between rows. In the distance, a group of women are harvesting. Their bead belts swing in unison, soft percussion against laughter and sweat. You're told the colors track not just the crop cycle, but also the stages of physical labor. Red bead, time to rest. Blue bead, time to dance. One woman wipes her brow and says, "A day without a bead is like soup without pepper." You laugh, but then she holds up a small strand. A day she was too sick to work, too tired to speak. Just one dull brown bead, unpolished, tucked between 2 bright ones. Still there, still counted. You realize how forgiving this bead calendar is. It allows for sorrow, for laziness, for off days. Try asking your smartwatch to do that. Another man shows you his ankle bracelet. 4 beads only. "These are my yams." He grins. One for each successful harvest. You ask what happens if the harvest fails. He shrugs. "Then I don't add one." We don't bead lies. It's such a calm idea. Tracking truth without shame. Letting failure sit alongside success. Not erasing, not spinning, just logging. You sit under a mango tree with a group of elders who pass around a strand of seed beads. Each one takes a turn adding a seed they've carried all year. Some are smooth, some pitted, one still sticky. They murmur names of floods, of weddings, of the time two roosters fought over a basket of groundnuts. That got a bead too. Because yes, it mattered. One fringe anthropologist once joked that Yoruba bead calendars were the earliest mood rings, adjusting their meaning depending on the wearer's feeling. And honestly, not the worst take. You find yourself wondering what your own bracelet would say. What would your beads be? A cracked one for that argument you still replay. A shining one for the time your laugh surprised even you. A dull one for forgetting your own birthday. A soft, worn bead for the person you still miss. You look up. The man with the field bracelet is gone, vanished into rows of maize. But his rhythm lingers, and his time, beaded, quiet, lived, is still being told by the land itself. You rise. A bead rolls from your pocket and lands in the dirt. You leave it there. Let it become part of the field's memory. A moment marked, a season turning. You make your way back toward town. A little dustier, a little more wrinkled, and definitely a little more convinced your own calendar system is missing some soul. As you walk, the sound of clinking grows louder, not beads worn on the body, but beads worn by the bureaucracy. Yes, bureaucracy. Even here, there are taxes, receipts, ledgers, except they don't use Excel. They use beads. At the edge of the town square, you spot a wiry man whose waist jingles with what looks like a chaotic belt of mismatched beads, cowries, and shells. He's an official tax collector, though he looks more like a wandering percussionist. He nods to you, barely stopping his chant as he moves from house to house, tapping doors and murmuring something rhythmic. You follow at a polite distance, and quickly realize each bead on his belt represents a household's payment, or lack thereof. Red beads mean taxes paid in full. Blue ones mean partial. White? Well, white means, not yet. There are black beads too. Those don't need translation. He stops at one doorway and calls out, "Still owe one goat and a pot of oil." A woman emerges holding a basket. She hands over the items without a word. He adds a red bead to her doorframe, yes, her doorframe, and moves on. Historians still argue whether these bead record systems should be classified as portable abacuses or a kind of wearable accounting software. Either way, it works. Even centuries ago, when colonial administrators arrived and insisted on paper ledgers, many local officials kept their beads just in case. And guess what? The beads were often more accurate. You spot a man who's clearly avoiding eye contact. The tax official stops, tilts his head. 3 years. Still no tribute. The man stammers something about illness and broken tools. The tax collector nods, fishes out a cloudy bead, and ties it loosely onto his belt. That's a mercy bead, he explains. It's temporary. If he pays soon, it turns red. You're about to ask how that works. Do beads magically change color? But he grins. No, I swap it out. Don't be dramatic. You ask what happens if someone really cheats the system. He holds up a jagged bead shaped like a cracked egg. This one? Public shame. If I wear it, everyone knows someone's dodging the gods. That's not just IRS level stress. That's spiritual accounting. There's even a separate strand for gossip-based verification. Neighbors can offer beads anonymously to confirm whether someone's payment claim is true. Yes, it's petty. And yes, it's wildly effective. You start to see why modern receipts feel so impersonal. You wander into a small building that acts as the village's central records hut. Inside, you find a wall strung with rows upon rows of beads, each corresponding to an event. A family, a payment, or a fine. It looks like someone tried to build a spreadsheet using jewelry. A young apprentice sits cross-legged, updating the strands. She murmurs each transaction aloud. 2 yams. 1 jar of honey. Late by 4 days. Add a delay bead. Her fingers move swiftly. She doesn't need to check her notes, because the beads are the notes. One row is particularly ornate. You ask about it. That's the strand of debts forgiven. She whispers, we keep it bright so people don't forget generosity is also part of law. You blink. A strand for mercy. Now that's a policy your landlord might want to adopt. Even marriages were recorded in bead strings, often hung at the entrance of homes. A twisted loop meant a separation. A braid? That meant two families had merged permanently. The more knots, the more complex the drama. Some bead strands would make Shakespeare weep. One scholar once joked that if bead tax records were decoded properly, they'd reveal not just a community's economy, but its emotional GDP. How much trust, tension, and hope was circulating at any given time. Outside, the tax collector finishes his route. He bows toward a shrine, pulls off one bead from his belt, and drops it into a gourd of water. Offering, he says, for fairness, because even the system, it seems, has to answer to someone. You leave the square, the sound of bead belts still bouncing behind you. It's strangely comforting, like the ticking of a bureaucratic heart that actually remembers your name. And maybe, just maybe, forgives late payments, as long as you bring honey. As the sun leans westward and shadows stretch like sleepy cats across the baked earth, you find yourself wandering into a quiet courtyard surrounded by orange trees and low mud walls. It feels like the kind of place where secrets nap in the corners. A place where stories bloom when no one is watching. And sure enough, you're about to witness a moment that doesn't belong in any history book, but probably should. A woman sits alone in the courtyard, twisting her fingers through a long strand of beads, mostly brown, with the occasional glint of gold or green. Her lips are pressed tight. Not in sorrow exactly, but something close. You sit nearby, and she doesn't mind. Eventually, she looks up. Do you know what happens? She says slowly. When someone puts the wrong bead on your string, you shake your head, because how would you? She holds up a green bead, simple, beautiful, and entirely out of place. He said this was for the time he promised to take me to see the ocean. Her voice is dry. We didn't go. He forgot. But the bead stayed. You blink. So this is emotional evidence? A receipt for broken promises. She shrugs, almost laughing. I kept it. I thought maybe he'd remember. Or maybe I'd forget. She lays the strand flat across her lap. But look, it doesn't belong. It's like wearing shoes to swim. Historians still argue whether personal bead strands were meant to be accurate records or emotional landscapes, maps of memory more than fact. One scholar even suggested that misplaced beads weren't mistakes at all, but symbols of confusion, conflict, or unresolved feelings, like a bookmark you don't want to move forward from. She threads the green bead out of the line slowly. I'm giving it back, she says, dropping it into a small clay bowl. No need to wear someone else's forgetfulness. You want to applaud, but you don't. You just watch as she threads a new bead in its place, yellow, matte, unremarkable to anyone but her. This one, she says with a smile, is for the day I took myself to the river and laughed until my jaw ached. And just like that, the strand shifts. The past doesn't change, but the story does. She holds up another bead, red with black streaks. This one, she whispers, was a fight. You raise an eyebrow. Not between us, she adds. Between my expectations and reality. She fingers it like it might answer back. We argued for weeks. In my head, he never even knew. You ask why she didn't remove that one too. She smiles. Because not every ugly bead is untrue. And there it is. The wisdom. In Yoruba culture, beads aren't just about events. They're about emotional weight. You don't wear a strand because it's perfect. You wear it because it remembers honestly. She stands, brushing off her wrapper, and walks to a small wooden box. Inside are dozens of loose beads, some chipped, some still gleaming. My history, she says simply, the parts that didn't make the final necklace. You imagine your own box. What beads would be in there? A black one for the friend you ghosted. A soft blue one for that time you almost cried in a supermarket. A jagged bead for every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. You ask if she ever gives beads away. She laughs. Of course, some memories are too heavy to carry alone, and others are better shared. She plucks out a small white bead with a golden core. "This is for clarity," she says. "I'm not using it yet." Then, without ceremony, she hands it to you. Maybe you are. You take it. It's warm. Somehow. Maybe from the sun. Maybe from her. In that moment, you understand that the Yoruba tradition of beads doesn't just preserve time. It reclaims it, even messy time, especially messy time. "Before you leave," she says, almost as an afterthought, "don't trust any memory without a bead. They're the ones that lie." Outside, the wind lifts slightly. A mango falls behind you with a soft thud. You keep walking, your new bead tucked safely in your palm. One more moment, one more truth, threaded. The path now takes you beyond the city's breath, down a dirt road lined with thorny bushes and the occasional goat who refuses to be impressed by your presence. You follow the scent of dust, sweat, and long-distance ambition, because today, you're traveling with the traders. Yoruba trade caravans were famous across West Africa, not for speed, not even for volume, but for the curious detail that traders often carried not just goods, but beads that told the story of every deal they'd made. You join a small group preparing to depart. Woven baskets packed, donkeys tethered, water gourds sealed with leaves, and, around every neck or waist or wrist, strings of beads so tangled and layered. They look like tangled histories, which, to be fair, they kind of are. The lead trader introduces himself as Kofi. His beard is streaked with gray, and his necklace rattles like a rainstick. "We don't write receipts," he says. "We wear them." You notice each bead strand has sections, clusters that correspond to different regions or goods. A dark blue loop for salt trades up north. A long ivory bead for ivory sales, yes, the irony is real, and a carved wooden disc, painted in faint ochre, for the time someone tried to trade him a cow for a wife. Didn't go through, he adds. Cow had attitude. Historians still argue whether these bead ledger traditions were standardized or improvised. Some say they followed a specific regional code. Others believe each trader created their own system, like wearable shorthand. Either way, they were functional and deeply personal. As the caravan moves, so do the stories. Beads swing, whispering. You learn that traders updated their strands on the road, often around campfires, retelling deals so they wouldn't be forgotten. One bead equals one transaction, but also one lesson, one surprise, one trickster moment. Later that day, the group stops under a massive baobab tree for lunch, spiced millet cakes and a stew so fiery it makes your ears sweat. Kofi unrolls a small cloth of loose beads and begins adding to his strand. You peer over his shoulder. One bead is shaped like a fish. "What's that for?" you ask. He grins. "For the deal I made while pretending to fish so someone wouldn't know I was bartering." You can't help it. You burst out laughing. A spy bead. Another trader, younger and quiet, holds up a single cloudy bead and says, "This is for the deal I didn't take. Too good to be true. I walked away." He wears it proudly, like a badge of restraint, which, in trade, is basically a superpower. One woman shows you a necklace entirely made of rejected trade beads, things she could have bought but didn't. "This is my almost necklace," she says. "Keeps me honest." You realize that in a world where every deal, mistake, or lesson gets a bead, regret has less space to grow. The caravan passes through a small village. People wave. Children run alongside, shouting, "Which bead are you today?" Traders laugh and reply with jingles. One kid points and yells, salt bead," like it's a superhero identity. Honestly, it kind of is. By evening, the group stops by a river to rest. A few traders wade in to wash. Their bead strands float on the water like lazy timelines. Kofi sits beside you, looking skyward. You know, he says, some folks think beads are just decoration. But we trade them too. He pulls out a pouch of fine glass pieces. These aren't just currency, they're memory for sale. Some were made locally, others, imported from as far as Venice. Yes, Venetian beads made their way into Yoruba trade circuits. Historians still debate how exactly. But one thing's clear. Beads traveled better than maps, and left less colonialism behind. As night falls, someone plays a flute, another hums a tune that doesn't seem to end, just loops like a spiral. You sit close to the fire, watching Kofi mend a broken bead string. This one broke after a fight, he says, a misunderstanding over pepper prices. It happens. You ask what he'll do. He ties a knot in the middle of the broken strand. That's my reminder, he says. We fixed it, but it left a wrinkle. You nod. Somehow, that knot says more than a paragraph ever could. The stars wheel above, the fire pops softly, and somewhere in the dark, another trader whispers to their bead strand, logging the day, bead by bead, like a prayer no one needs to hear aloud to believe. You lie back. You don't have a necklace. Not yet, but you feel the weight of moments around your wrist anyway. And tomorrow, you might have a bead to add. The next day arrives not with an alarm clock, but with the grumble of drums echoing from the heart of the village. You follow the sound instinctively, carried along by a slow-moving tide of villagers dressed in vivid fabrics. Faces painted, voices lifted in anticipation. It's festival day, a celebration of the gods, the harvest, and of course, the beads. You've barely rounded the corner when a streak of movement blurs past, a dancer. Half human, half whirlwind, wrapped in streaming cloth and drenched in beadwork from head to ankle. Each step releases a rattle, a chime, a tickle of history. It's not music, it's a timeline in motion. This is the festival of Esu, the trickster deity, guardian of crossroads, interpreter of mischief and truth, and apparently a very opinionated fashion critic, because the wrong bead pattern can seriously offend him. The crowd thickens around the sacred grove where the masked dancers perform. Every move has a meaning, every outfit a story, and every single one, every anklet, every sash, every neck loop, is woven with ceremonial beads, each color placed with religious precision. A priestess in white approaches you with calm authority. She's holding a strand of red and black beads, Esu's sacred colors. Wear these, she says, so he doesn't think you're ignoring him. You oblige, because honestly, you don't want divine mischief with your breakfast. Historians still debate whether Esu's beads were chosen for aesthetic, mythological, or psychological reasons. Some say red represents vitality, black the unknown. Others claim the combination is meant to keep you alert. Either way, you now have a front row seat to the most theatrical timekeeping system on the continent. In Yoruba religion, gods are not vague ideas. They're characters with personalities, moods, and preferences, and those preferences include how they're beaded. During the dances, one performer falters, nearly dropping a calabash of offerings. Gasps ripple through the crowd. A priest mutters and rushes over to check his bead strands, specifically the sequence. Apparently, he swapped 2 beads. Big mistake. Bad omens bloom like spilled ink. The ritual is paused. The beads reset. You whisper to a nearby onlooker. Is this common? They grin. Esu has a sense of humor. But his patience? Not beaded. Another performer approaches the shrine with an offering, yam pounded into smooth perfection, ringed with beads that spell out the lineage of the farmer who grew them. You blink. The gods don't just want gifts. They want context. Even animal sacrifices wear beads. Goats led into the grove with tiny ankle bracelets made of glass and copper. The idea is that no soul, human or otherwise, arrives anonymous. Everyone arrives already storied. A trickster priest. Yes, that's a job. pulls out a woven sash and invites the audience to guess the story based on its bead pattern. Is it the tale of the woman who danced herself invisible? He asks, shaking a strand of white and purple. Or the farmer who married a spirit by mistake? Shouts erupt. Bets are made. Laughter follows. It's basically charades, but mythological and heavily accessorized. You join a circle where children are being taught to identify divine bead sequences. They get flashcards, beads glued to gourds, matching games. One boy misidentifies Ogun, the god of iron, as Osun, the river goddess. The group erupts in dramatic groans. That's how rivers rust, someone yells. It's hilarious and educational. One fringe folklorist once suggested that Yoruba ceremonial beadwork functioned as an encrypted liturgy, spiritual truths coded in patterns only the faithful could interpret. You're inclined to agree, except it's more fun than any church service you've ever attended. By midday, everyone is sweating, singing, swaying. You're given a chance to offer something, a personal moment to mark. You think back to yesterday, to the bead in your pocket. You tie it to a nearby tree with a whisper. A woman nods solemnly. Now ESU knows your place on the path. As the festival winds down, dancers collapse in joyful heaps, sweat streaking their face paint. The priestess returns, retrieving your red and black strand. She inspects it, nods. No mischief today, she says. You wore it well. The sky bruises toward evening. You watch as the ceremonial beads are carefully removed, wrapped in cloth, and placed in a calabash carved with moon phases. Each bead will rest for a year, dreaming in silence until the gods call for them again. You sit on a stone bench, dazed and amazed. You just seen religion as a wearable archive, where every prayer, every rule, every sly trick had a bead. And you walked away with one fewer sin. Or at least a temporary truce. You stand, your neck lighter, but your memory, heavier, in a good way. And somewhere, far behind, a trickster god probably chuckles, because one of your shoelaces is mysteriously untied. The next morning opens like a yawn, slow, bright, a little dusty. You wander toward a shaded veranda near the edge of the village, drawn by the smell of boiled yam and something sweeter, like fresh palm wine or soap. A small group of children sits cross-legged on woven mats, their eyes wide, fingers busy. You've stumbled upon a bead lesson. And just like that, you're back in school, but not the kind with chalkboards or bells. This classroom has birds for background music and a teacher who wears more beads than most jewelry stores could stock. She introduces herself as Mama Bissy. Her voice is patient, her hands quick. In her lap sits a wide shallow bowl filled with beads, some clay, some glass, some shaped like stars. Each child is given a string and a task to record their week. No writing, no grades, just beads. One boy begins with a red one. I fought with Tunda, he says, but we shared puff puff after. So I added white. Mama Bissy nods approvingly. Another child picks a dull brown bead. I stepped in goat poo and cried. It was a long day. You feel that one deeply. The point isn't perfection, it's pattern recognition. These kids aren't just threading pretty things. They're learning to narrate their lives, to place memories in order, to hold space for mistakes, and joy, and smells. Historians still debate whether Yoruba bead education systems like this existed in a structured, formal sense, or whether they were more improvisational, taught through games, songs, and repetition. Some scholars claim this is proto-literacy. Others say it's emotional training disguised as play. Either way, it works. A girl named Bola shows you her strand, 5 beads, each carefully chosen. This one is green. It's for the mango I ate too fast. I choked a little. She grins. But I lived. The other kids laugh. You ask how they decide which colors mean what. Mama Bissy shrugs. We guide them, but each child finds their meanings. She lifts a strand from her wrist. Mine says joy is blue. For my sister, joy is yellow. She's wrong, of course. Later, the children are asked to rearrange their beads to make new stories. What if the mango came before the fight? What if the goat was your goat? It becomes clear. These beads don't just record time. They rehearse possibility. A boy named Sola adds a bead shaped like a tiny bird. He doesn't explain it. Mama Bissy doesn't ask. She just ties it on for him. Some memories don't want to be narrated. They want to be worn quietly. In one corner, a girl strings her beads in complete silence. Eyes narrowed in concentration. Her final pattern is sharp. Black, 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 red, white. She hands it to the teacher without a word. Mama Bissy nods and wraps it around the girl's wrist. You ask if something's wrong. Just a tough week, Mama says. But now it's threaded. Now it can rest. And somehow, that makes sense. You help a child pick between two nearly identical blue beads. He frowns. This one's the right blue. I was only medium happy. You chuckle. Medium happy sounds about right for most Mondays. Some strands are long, others short. Some kids fill theirs with mistakes, beads of spilled soup, missed chores, lies confessed. But there's no shame. No one hides their strand. They wear it, swing it, show it. The necklace isn't about boasting. It's about balance. Mama Bissy explains that older children often begin adding family beads to their strands, borrowing from parents, aunts, cousins. It's how they learn they're not the first to feel confused. You look at a pile of beads discarded in a bowl. The forgotten ones? She grins. No, the maybe laters. You sit with the children for hours. Help them knot, untangle, select. One girl lets you hold her strand and asks, "Which bead is your favorite?" You point to a pale, cracked pink one. "That one?" She giggles. "That's the time I sat on an anthill and pretended it didn't hurt. I was brave for 10 full seconds." You both laugh. She adds, "But it hurt, so I added this gray one too." She taps it gently. Balance. By the end of the lesson, each child has a story on their wrist. Some triumphant, some messy, all true. They line up to sing a song about their beads. Each verse beginning with, "This is what I remember," and ending with, "And tomorrow I'll add more." It's haunting and funny and beautiful in a way you can't quite explain. As they leave, Mama Bissy hands you a strand with one loose bead. You helped someone name a memory. She says, "This is yours." You nod, oddly moved, not because you taught, but because you learned. Time doesn't wait for us. But sometimes, it lets us catch up, one bead at a time. As afternoon stretches into golden calm, you wander into the quieter edge of town, past rows of low houses where voices hush and doors creak slowly open. There's a stillness here, a softness. Not the loud joy of festivals or the bright curiosity of children, but a different kind of presence. And that's when you see it. A man sitting alone beneath a fig tree. Legs stretched out, the other bent slightly, a thin beaded anklet glinting at his ankle. He doesn't notice you at first. He's staring at the sky like he's waiting for it to blink first. You pause, unsure. Then he gestures, just slightly, an invitation. You sit beside him on the earth, and after a moment of silence, he says simply, 3 more beads to go." You glance down at his anklet. 7 beads, 4 of them darkened, almost blackened by wear. The 5th, recent, brighter. The 6th sits ready. The 7th is not yet threaded. He's a prisoner, though there are no bars. His sentence is marked not in days, not on a calendar, but in beads. 1 bead for each moon of penance. Each bead threaded not by him, but by the elders of the village after each full cycle, if his behavior allows. "Most days I earn them," he says quietly. "Some moons, I nearly didn't." You don't ask what he did. You don't need to. Historians still argue whether this bead-based system of justice was symbolic punishment or restorative ritual. In some records, anklet beads were used for low-level community transgressions, spilled secrets, broken promises, debts unpaid. In others, they marked deeper wrongs. But always, the beads marked the path toward re-entry. not permanent exile. You notice a boy approaching with a gourd of water. He hands it to the man. Doesn't speak, then leaves. That's the nephew of the man I wronged. The man says, looking at the cup, today, he brought water. Last month, he didn't look at me. He takes a careful sip. Each bead on the anklet has a memory. A conflict revisited, an apology offered, a kindness returned, and the anklet tightens, ever so slightly, as each bead is added. Not enough to harm, just enough to remind. There's a term for it in Yoruba thought, ireti lara, or hope in the body. The idea that atonement should be felt, but not to destroy. It's a tether, not a cage. You ask if he knows when the next bead will come. Only the elders decide. I just live the bead I'm on. It strikes you how different this is from punishment you've known. Here, the sentence isn't about disappearance. It's about presence. To be seen in the community. To walk the market. To sweep the shrine. To tend to a stranger's goats in silence. And to wear your journey where people can see it. One villager passes and nods to him, not warmly, but not coldly either. You sense something thawing. The anklet rattles slightly as he shifts his weight. He picks up a loose bead from beside him, clear, unthreaded. This one's for forgiveness. I don't wear it yet. It's not mine until it's given. You sit with him a while longer, both of you staring at nothing in particular. A rooster makes a sound like it's trying to remember how to crow properly. Somewhere a pot clatters. Life continues. He chuckles suddenly. I used to laugh louder than anyone. He says, now I laugh like I'm asking permission. You ask if he regrets it, the beads, the silence, the slowness. No, he says, I regret the lie I told that led to them. The beads? They're just the receipt. You stand to leave, but he holds up a small, rough bead, a brown one, worn unevenly. This is my first, he says, made it myself, in the clay behind the shrine. The elders let me start the anklet, said it'd help the truth settle in my bones. You touch the bead gently, then place your hand over your own wrist, imagining a thread there. Maybe we all have invisible anklets. You think, just some of us never notice the beads we carry. As you walk away, the man sits still, humming something tuneless and soft. The anklet glints again, and you hear the faintest clink, like a bell reminding time that people can change. You step away from the shade of the fig tree, thoughts heavy with the weight of forgiveness. When the noise of the village begins to shift, there's something in the air, an energy, low and simmering. You follow it, pulled not by sound or smell this time, but by tension. And soon enough, you arrive at a veranda where three men argue quietly over a table covered in paper, ink, and, awkwardly, beads. You've stumbled into a moment of colonial confusion. One man wears a starched white shirt and a pith helmet that's trying far too hard to look authoritative. A British officer, by the look of it, frowning down at a ledger and wagging his pen like it's a wand. Across from him, a Yoruba scribe sits calmly, his hands folded in his lap, and beside him, a third man, older, wearing a string of official beads and a look of profound exasperation. You quietly find a spot near the wall. No one notices you. The room feels like the inside of a teapot just before it whistles. We need proper documentation, the Brit says, tapping the paper. Dates, numbers, totals, not, he waves at the beads. Bracelets. The scribe smiles politely. They are not bracelets. They are records. You cannot audit a necklace. You can if you know how to read it. The officer pinches the bridge of his nose. No more colored beads. From now on, transactions must be inked, on paper, signed. The elder says nothing. He just reaches into his satchel and pulls out a long strand of dark glass and bone. He lays it down across the table, careful and slow. Then he begins to explain, pointing bead by bead. This is the tribute of palm oil from Odo Agbo. This, the bride price returned after divorce. This, the fine for cutting down a sacred tree. Each bead holds tone, weight, history. The officer blinks. That's impossible. There's no consistency. The scribe tilts his head. There's context. Historians still argue over this era of bureaucratic clash. Some say the colonial administration dismissed indigenous recordkeeping out of arrogance. Others suggest they simply couldn't grasp a relational, symbolic logic. Beads don't obey columns and rows. They whisper, joke, contradict. They make you feel the numbers. You peer over the scribe's shoulder. He's been quietly writing a translation, attempting to turn years of beaded memory into linear ink. But every so often, he hesitates, frowns, draws a small symbol instead of a number. Beads, it seems, don't always want to convert. One scholar once described this moment as the bureaucratic bottleneck of cultural translation. Another just called it when the empire met the necklace. Outside the building, people continue to use beads because they trust them. The paper? That's for the officials, for the files, for silence. Inside, the tension finally breaks when the elder places one last bead, larger, rounder, made of wood charred black. This, he says, is the one you forget. The officer leans in. This bead is the drought. The one you didn't count. The reason why 2 families gave less tribute last season. Your ledger called it evasion. Our bead calls it survival. Silence. The officer looks away. You realize then, colonial recordkeeping didn't just erase complexity. It often misread pain as rebellion. The meeting ends with neither side conceding. The paper stays. The beads remain. And in the end, the scribe will keep both records, one for the rulers, and one for the truth. As the sun begins to set, the elder exits first. You follow. He walks slowly, every bead on his belt bouncing lightly. You ask him if he minds keeping 2 systems alive. He smiles without stopping. The paper forgets, he says. The beads remember. Later that night, you spot a younger official trying to memorize bead codes by firelight. He's frustrated. The pattern makes no sense. You watch as an old woman hands him a necklace. Wear it first, she says. Then maybe it'll speak. Because that's how memory works here. You don't start by reading it. You start by living inside it. The night deepens, but sleep won't come yet. Not here. Not with your mind swirling with bead codes, tax belts, mourning strands, and the quiet echo of footsteps in ancient marketplaces. You drift toward a low building lit by a single oil lamp. It smells of ink, charcoal, and old tobacco. Inside, a group of elders sit around a table. A pot of water steams quietly. There is laughter, low and warm. There is tension too, but not the bitter kind. This is the delicious tension of disagreement. Welcome to the great bead debate. The circle includes griots, beadmakers, priests, and 1 or 2 proper historians, scrolls tucked under their arms, egos hidden badly beneath their smiles. They sit shoulder to shoulder, examining a single strand of ancient beads laid out on the table. Some nod, others shake their heads. The disagreement is not about authenticity. It's about interpretation. This green cluster, one says, marks a season of surplus. The rivers overflowed. No, says another, tapping the same beads. That's the year of Iba Oni, when too much rain rotted the yams. It can't be both. Why not? Someone chuckles. Because history demands a version. Memory doesn't. Historians still argue whether beads should be viewed as objective artifacts or narrative portals. The scholars in this room? They're leaning toward the latter. Because context changes everything. One elder pulls out a nearly identical strand, same colors, different order. This belonged to my grandfather. He strung it for protection during travel. Another responds, mine used it to track debts owed by spirits. Everyone laughs. Ghosts have terrible credit. Apparently, the night slips further into playfulness. Someone proposes a bead-themed riddle. Another begins a song whose lyrics shift with every bead he touches. You're pretty sure the melody insults every ancestor in the room, but no one seems offended. If anything, they're impressed. A young apprentice tries to present a theory that some beads were designed specifically to confuse colonizers. Misdirection patterns. He calls them symbols made to look like trade records but actually prayers. He's immediately heckled. You read too many scrolls. Or not enough. Drink some water and stop making beads paranoid. Still, the idea hangs in the air that maybe some knowledge was hidden in plain sight. Strung between jokes and everyday noise, someone unrolls a cloth filled with mismatched beads, found loose in burial sites, shrines, and beneath floorboards of houses long gone. One elder begins sorting them instinctively. This is for childbirth. This is for betrayal. This one? I think it's just pretty. You realize there's no consensus here. And there never will be. Because the point isn't to solve the beads, it's to listen to them. One woman, old enough to remember the last 3 Oba coronations, leans in and murmurs, "My mother said you can never truly understand a bead unless you know who made it, who wore it, and who buried it." You ask if she believes that. She nods slowly, or you can just feel it. Some beads hum, some don't. A quiet settles in. Even the fire crackles more gently. One of the griots reaches into his pouch and pulls out a strand made of coconut shell, bone, and a single blue glass bead. "This," he says, "is the story of my brother. He never wore it. He never asked for it. But I strung it anyway." Someone asks why. "Because he lived. And that's enough for a bead." The others nod. The debate isn't over. It never will be. Tomorrow they'll meet again, argue all over, shift meanings, swap memories. And the beads? The beads will wait, patient, silent, complicated, like history, like us. You stand to leave, but a voice stops you. "Take one," someone says, gesturing toward the cloth of spare beads. "Choose one you don't understand." You pick a pale green oval, uneven and cracked. "Good." The elder grins. "Now let it confuse you for a few years." You laugh quietly and slip it into your pocket. Another unsolved memory to carry. Outside, the night air cools your face. Somewhere in the distance, a drum thumps once, then silence. In the dark, the bead in your pocket feels warm. Or maybe it's your palm. You don't know what it means yet. But you will. You rise early, earlier than usual, drawn by a strange sense of calm. Maybe it's the final morning breeze brushing through the fig trees. Or maybe it's the faint pressure of the green bead still tucked in your pocket. Either way, today feels like a closing thread. You walk slowly toward the river, past sleeping goats, dew-beaded grass, and vendors setting up their morning stalls. There's no rush. The world is not rushing. And neither are you. Down by the riverbank, the water rolls gently, humming to itself like it knows a secret. And there, standing ankle deep in the current, is an old woman. She doesn't look surprised to see you. Just nods, as if you're right on time. Around her neck is a necklace of extraordinary length. It coils twice around her chest, dips to her waist, then hangs loose down one arm. It's too long to be practical, too heavy to be fashionable. But it glows, not with shine, but with presence. "This," she says, "is everything I've remembered." You sit beside her on a flat rock, shoes off, feet in the cold water. She lifts the necklace slowly, letting the beads clink and settle like pages turning. "This one," she begins, "is the day I first walked without holding someone's hand. This one, the smell of rain when I still loved him. This one," she holds up a cloudy yellow orb, "the sound my baby made before he learned to cry." You don't interrupt. "This," she continues, "was the mango tree that never bloomed. But I kept waiting anyway." You notice that some beads are chipped, some glowing, a few are twisted into small knots of thread. "Why the knots?" you ask. "Those are the times I forgot who I was," she says, "but I found my way back." Historians still argue whether personal bead strands like hers are meant to be passed down, buried, or burned. But here, now, none of that matters. What matters is how complete it feels. Not perfect, complete. You watch as she lifts the final bead, a smooth, white one shaped like an egg. "This is the last one I'll add. After that, it's someone else's turn." She offers you the strand. You panic, just a little. I can't wear this. She chuckles. Of course not. It's not for wearing. It's for learning how to string your own. Then she pulls from her pouch a small blank thread, hands it to you, with 3 beads. 1 amber, 1 red, 1 milky blue. The first is for the moment you arrived. The second for what you've let go. The third, well, that's for later. You hold the beads. They're warm. Or maybe you're just ready. A soft wind brushes your face. Somewhere behind you, the village begins its day. Grinding yam, chasing chickens, laughing, remembering. You rise slowly, tuck the thread into your satchel, and walk the edge of the water. The world feels slower now, but not stagnant, like a river moving underground, like memory waiting for you to catch up. You finger the amber bead. The old woman is gone, or maybe she's further down the river. Either way, the path ahead is open, and your string is just beginning. You keep walking, feeling the rhythm of your steps, hearing the gentle clink of something not yet visible but very much alive. You are, finally, beaded into time. So now, as your body begins to soften into the mattress, and your breath deepens just a little more with each slow exhale, picture your own bead strand, not made of glass or stone, but of moments. Let the first bead be today, just as it was. Maybe a little cracked, maybe brighter than you expected. Then place another for a memory you haven't visited in a while. One that hides under the couch cushions of your mind. Let it roll forward. Let it breathe. A third bead forms, shaped like laughter you didn't think would come, but did anyway. And now, no need to rush. String the beads as slowly as you like. Let your wrist grow heavy with honesty. Let your chest loosen with the absence of needing to remember everything. It's enough to hold it, just long enough to know it mattered. Breathe in. The necklace does not need to be finished tonight. Breathe out. It just needs to be yours. Let the room dim around you now. Let the fan hum like distant drumbeats from a market long gone. The beads will wait. The story is still yours. And in the quiet of sleep, when the night becomes soft as worn cloth, you may dream of rivers, and songs, and children sorting colors with serious hands. But for now, just rest. You've carried enough.